Hello there. I'm Jay from the Unbreakable Entrepreneur, and today I would like to introduce you one of my students, Travis, who's done an amazing transformation in a very short space of time. So, without further ado, Travis, over to you.
So yeah, my name is Travis Atwater. I'm the owner and founder of Field Warrior Consulting, and I help guys really line up their lifestyle with their business and relationships. Mainly because I've struggled with all of those, and I find it's really helpful to align more than just one area of life. And so my background as an entrepreneur started, I would say, about probably 7 years ago, and it wasn't the typical fluffy, exciting journey that I would have thought it would be, right? For me, it was exciting for about 2 to 3 months.
All right.
and, and then like the anxiety and the pressure of trying to balance everything, it started to really take its toll. And then I didn't even know I was really in depression at the time. I just knew I was in a very dark place. And so when I reached out for help at that time, it was like predominantly medication was like all anybody would ever want to talk about, right? It wasn't matter if it was other business owners. Most people were either on drugs or on medication, which is just another form of drugs, right? And what I found along the way was that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this whole dichotomy of building ourselves into a new version of ourselves, but also not completely falling apart in the process. And so I definitely became very lost along my way, to say the least. And I was at a point where I was so watered down that I was trying pretty much anything and everything to get some kind of clarity in my life. And it wasn't until we connected that I started to realize there's a spiritual side to this element of entrepreneurship that I really hadn't engaged. And when we get lost in the day to day stuff, um, it's easy to become very overwhelmed and we lose sight of the greater picture. So I think when we start off in business, that's where the excitement comes from. We have a vision and it's very broad and we don't get caught up in the weeds, so to speak, right? And then along the way, you start getting all of the bills start piling up and trying to keep cash flow moving and everything and all that kind of stuff. It's you get caught up in the weeds, and that's what happened to me.
How was that for you, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, the biggest thing I would say is I didn't expect it to get as dark as it did. Uh,
Right.
so so for me, it wasn't just the anxiety of the day to day; it was not being able to sleep at night. And when I say not being able to sleep at night, at that particular time, I'd been on my third round of medication to try to help, I guess, numb myself out, and it was horrendous. There was no sleeping. I was At one point, I had to get up and walk around naked in minus 40-degree weather outside in the winter to try to like
Wow.
maintain a sense of sanity. Like it just couldn't, because your head is just constantly spinning every possible scenario, right? And when you're depressed, there's just such a massive lack of hope. Like nothing, there's no drive to do anything, just even to get out of bed in the morning. It wouldn't have mattered how bright it was outside because daylight can be a big indicator for a lot of us if we're struggling with depression. But I found it didn't matter. Like in the darkest moments, there was nothing anyone could really say to me at that particular time. And I wasn't functioning. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't eating. I wasn't taking care of myself, all exercise. So I was big into lifting weights like I am now. All of that had stopped. And it was just like this day to day struggle to figure out. It wasn't even a matter of what I was going to do throughout the day. It was just like a moment to moment trying to keep myself going. And it's a very defeating place to be because not only does your business fail at some point, obviously as you're failing, all of your relationships do as well. And so that's with clients, family, friends, all of it. And for me, it all sort of speaking of waking up to what depression can do in the darker states. As far as taking it back here for a second, in the deeper states of depression, like I was getting at, I was on my third round of medication, and at one point, the the experiences were so visceral and dark that I could not, like, I was seeing really dark stuff. And at one point, just the patterns on the carpet in the living room that I was in were just like it was completely freaking me out. I couldn't stare at them, so I had to put a blanket over my head and like pitch black my environment so that I could ground and just deep breathe and deep breathe. And it was more like hyperventilating because at that point I hadn't met you, and there wasn't a whole lot of, like, in my background, I had pretty much zero inclination towards what real meditation is, as well as deep breathing exercises can do for your mind. And so at that point, yeah, I mean, between trying to walk around naked in -40 in the winter, when your mind is that vulnerable and trying to, find its grounding, it's really, I would say, creepy what happens, and it's scary. I mean, the second I realized, wow, that was not, what I thought it was, in a very dark way. Very humbling, to say the least. Like, I remember coming home that night, and like, I hit the gym as hard as I could to just get my nervous system pumping. Came home, hit the floor, and like just fell apart. And then I was like laughing afterwards because I'm like, this is ridiculous, but I made it. Like, it was like I survived. And so between you and I, like, thank you a lot. Like, that's there's the side of like this training that people, I think, won't understand until they get into it, and the darkness, how fucking dark that can get. Like, shamanism was the same. You tried to warn me of that. It's like they slip in little tidbits of like things that seem right, but then along the way you realize it's completely not right the way they pitch it to you. And
Yeah.
it's quite the journey, to say the least. So I'm very happy to be here, and I owe you a lot for that one. So thank you.
Pleasure. Happy to be of service.
What I didn't realize is like how slippery that slope of darkness is.
Yeah.
And without your training, honestly, I honestly would never have gotten out of that. I'll be honest with you, had I not had we have not crossed paths. Like, when we first met, it wasn't even to train. We were going to do like some kind of an event together, and then you're like, oh my God, this guy needs help. Right. And like, it wasn't until after that first call I realized just how bad things were kind of getting for me and the training that I was in. And very humbly can admit that if I had have kept going in the path that I was on, I highly doubt, one, that I would even be here today because of how depressed and how dark it was getting, but two, like, what that would have meant for all the people that knew me. Because as I become more of my true self and step back into my alignment, I've had friends reach out and say, like, I thought I wasn't super happy in helping people, but just my presence now is enough for some people to like completely shift their day, which is incredible. Because when I was in shamanism, it was like people didn't want to be around me, and I didn't really want to be around me because it was like this weird feeling of squishy wateriness and just it was completely weird. And to be here today, literally Friday night, I went over to a friend's house and we had a quick chat, and he messaged me later and he's like, you know what, man, you've changed my life so much just by the conversations we've had. And that comes from me being able to be true to who I am, and obviously from what you've trained me to be. So I know, like, honestly, thank you from like all that I am. I sincerely appreciate it. I think where the deeper parts of like the lack of hope and the despair came in was no one around me could explain it or really help me. None of like my family or friends had gone through it. And if they did, no one was talking about it, right? And that's like one of the biggest things is I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs go through these states in different elements and different levels, but there's not really anybody to talk about it or help us understand the actual underlying causes of it, right? Without just trying to cover it up with something. So
Yeah, it's so true. Well, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I remember that you actually took the spiritual path after going to doctors and being given prescriptions and loads of them. At one point, you decided to explore the spiritual path, but you said it didn't quite work out for you. So could you share a little bit more about that?
for sure, yeah. So, and at that point in my journey, I was like so done with medication and all the other routes that I tried I started getting into spirituality, and some friends of mine were in a belief system called shamanism, and so they kind of led me into that path, so to speak. And it was if it's such a thing, I would say there's a more masculine side of shamanism, but like we weren't dancing around doing weird stuff like that. But it was just a much more passive way of living life. And so when I started, what I loved about spirituality was it brought my vision back and being able to get out of like the day-to-day stuff where I was trapped. But there was no forward action. It was just like constantly going back through old wounds and healing stuff all the time. And it's like at one point, I just wanted to get on with my life. Like it's great that we have things to work on, and we're always in development, so to speak. But at some point, and you even mentioned this to me when we started working together, was you can't live your life based on trying to heal things every day all the time. Like you just, where's the progress, right? I mean, you're always looking for a problem, and until you pointed that out, there's a pretty big flaw in the belief pattern that I was in that time. I really hadn't picked that up, and so traveling that path of shamanism, I was about little over 2 years into that, and I really that's around the time we started to connect, and I became aware of how incongruent that path is for me specifically, and I think for a lot of guys is it's just
Yeah.
it waters you down to the point where you're so susceptible to almost anybody else's beliefs, right? You realize, like having worked with you for so long now as well and trained with you, to realize now that the spiritual side is very important, especially as an entrepreneur. But there are multiple belief systems and paths you can take, and having the right one is what's going to really align people, and I think help them cultivate their sense of dignity, if nothing else. And I think
Yeah, totally.
in shamanism and those watery paths, I just lost that sense of fire. There was nothing inside, and people would just say something, and I would try to cater to them. I was like a people pleaser, and it's a pattern to definitely be aware of as entrepreneurs, because we definitely need to honor our own boundaries and have that self-respect. And if there's anything you've definitely taught me, it's having and maintaining personal dignity. Like I really hadn't connected with that principle and trying to live a more virtuous life. And so I really appreciated that with my time with you, training with you, and all of the other amazing insights I've had along the way.
Glad to hear that. So, could you tell us a little bit more what training with me was like?
I think the biggest shift from you was the worldview that I gained. And so training with you, definitely not an easy path. And any real work would never be, right? And so I think that's how I kind of realized it was going to be an awesome journey. Because I mean, at the beginning, again, excited to learn something new. And then when you get into the actual shadow work and like really working on ourselves, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And I can humbly admit there are times when I definitely wanted to just completely quit it all and walk away. And I think I did walk away for a bit, and until I realized just how badly I was out of alignment and how much I needed this, your guidance, if nothing else. And so when you add in who you are as a person into the training that you offer, it just compounds what you delivered. And so to me, to be here today and to be building my business back up and my life back up and having your guidance for the clarity alone, because it's not just a matter of the warrior idea. I think a lot of us connect with that. But when you are deep into wounds you haven't looked at, or behavioral patterns where you avoid doing the things you need to do, there's a reason for that, right? And so as you've taught me, you've brought to light a lot of my, I would say, kind of blockages along the way. And as we opened up even just one of those, it would open up a route of action throughout my relationships, business. All of it was interconnected, right? So it was a very big learning curve to see how quickly that could compound when I actually didn't just try to run away and face the stuff that I needed to face.
Yeah, that's the part of growing up, right?
Yes, yeah. And I think at some point too, I will say this, I know I've talked with other guys as well, and I think it's such a journey to keep learning as we go. And I mean, to be the age that I am now and have the experiences that I have, a lot of the time I don't feel like I'm actually the age that I am. I feel a lot younger, which is odd, but also great because I don't feel like I look at people the same age as myself and I see where they're heading and like their physical health is declining and you can see it. And with after having trained with you, I actually feel like I'm going to live longer. Like it just it's like it's a shift in terms of how I think we also view lifestyle. And so like learning how to really not just take care of ourselves, but like learning how to manage our life force energy. No one talks about that. Like it's just go eat some awesome vegetables and fruit, and go
Yeah.
live your life. And it's like, okay, but what are the deeper implications of all of this, right? And so just the
Yeah.
spiritual side with you and bringing that into business and then learning how as my personal power accumulates and builds up and I can express it clearly, it's huge with customers and clients as well because then I'm much more clear with them and direct and assertive, and it obviously relates to everything else. So it's been a massive learning curve to say the least.
I can definitely say that your life energy is so much stronger now. And you've got a much more powerful presence than when we first met. Anything else that you would like to add in terms of where you are right now and what improvements you've seen on your journey?
For sure. I would say some of the largest improvements I've seen is the awareness of my thinking patterns. So I had behavioral patterns when I first had started training with you where I was so wrapped up in my own thoughts and what I thought was like a reality. And as I kind of started training with you, I started to become aware of when my mind would get upset or when I would start kind of beating myself up and all of these different darker states come into play. He would remind me that I'm missing, like, there's a reason for that, right? And so to have the awareness when I'm working with people or just even engaging my day to day life, and I start feeling like I'm beating myself up, to be able to catch that and stop it and redirect that energy so I'm not destroying myself. That's been huge for me because I my biggest battle in my life has always been mental for me. It's just like whatever's going on in
Yeah.
my head, right? Whatever's going on in my head, I'm very much an imagination kind of person. And so to be able to learn how to manage what I'm envisioning for my life and discern, what's real, what's not, because your mind can make things seem real when it's not, right? And that's something that no other training that I've been in has really helped me gain the clarity on that you've been able to help me gain the clarity on. Is kind of cutting the BS out of what we're telling ourselves, so to speak.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm from the non BS league.
It's just really cool. It's really something to experience that because even like my own father and having these male role models, they're not real masculine role models. They're all messes. And like that's why I'm like, okay, I I'd never until you pointed out like how important real masculine leadership is, I hadn't really clued in. And you seeing these guys and like their dignity go down and stuff. And it's like that's not how I want to live. So the leadership side of my life has changed a lot. And I find like where I can get where I was able to get in those depressive states and not think highly of myself, talking to some of these guys at work, especially on the bad days where I'm like struggling to make sense of like what's going on in that. One of the guys said to me, he's like, you don't even know how much you've done for all of us. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like most of these guys are pretty used to not talking about, what's going on in their lives and stuff. And this one guy in particular is just all pent up. You could see it. And the level of trust these guys have to come to me and open up. And, this one guy was completely falling apart the one day, comes up 6 stories to the floor I'm working on and starts like opening up. And I'm like, you should just go home. I'm like, I want to hear what you have to say. So I listened to him and I'm like, between you and I've got you covered. Go home, do what you got to do. Right. And like, just being able to be a true leader, like as you teach me to, is it's okay to have down days and stuff, but keep moving forward. And so it's a very humbling journey in many levels for sure. Right? Like with COVID, it was a complete disaster. The whole industry was been like, I've watched so many guys quit, leave, walk away, companies fold
Yeah.
up. And like through all of that,
somehow we held it together. And yeah, my biggest role, I told them all when I went back, is like, I'm here to help. So like, that's a leader. Like, the higher up you go, the more you have to serve. That's just kind of how I look at it, right? So I learned a lot though, and I think that because of your training and who you are and the work that you do, my awareness feels like it's just exponential. Like I'm seeing patterns now of what took 10 years to do before to live out now is like basically just a matter of a month or two. The biggest thing today, I want to just really say thank you for everything. It means a lot. Like to come home here that night and be able to message you. I know you're busy, but just to know, okay, I just feel like you're like my guardian or something. You know, it's like, okay, I do some dumb things. Well, I just feel like, especially at the spiritual side, like being over there and then like, it's, you know what it's like you said, to walk alone. It's not a fun path. And one of the biggest lessons I took away from what I just went through is taking the pain and using it for progress. So not basking in it like I used to. Like that watery way was to like bask in the pain and get lost in all of it, right? And now I'm learning how to, okay, acknowledge it, do what I have to do, like be present with it, whatever, but then what's next? Not just stay stuck in it. And today, honestly, just to sit here and chat with you, it's like, I feel like you're an awesome teacher, but today I also feel like you're a friend. Like I just feel like there's a level of trust that's just nice to really experience.
Oh,
really
thank you. That. Thank you. It's great to hear. And from what I remember, you stopped taking meds quite some time ago.
Yes. So I would say, I don't even know if it was really that long. I think it was like 6 months into training with you, maybe. I'd been on medication on and off for about 3 to 4 years before you and I started working together. And I would say about 6 months in, I just got to the point where I didn't want it. And I didn't want the medication in my system. And when you and I would talk, I just felt groggy, very disoriented. Like that's what this medication do, right? And as I kind of weaned myself off of that, life became much better. So that was only, probably maybe 6 months in, even if it was that long, just to be able to get that clarity and have the confidence to realize what that medication wasn't doing for me, even though they were trying to tell me what it was. So, and it's been 3 years now. I haven't been on any medication. So it's a big shift. And I mean, I think to be completely honest too, there are still days when we have ups and downs, and like that's reality for anybody. But to be at this point now where I can navigate my life and go places, like I couldn't even go into like large retail stores before with lots of people. It would just create me, my mind couldn't handle the noise and all the people. And now, even on days when I have a darker day, I still am able to pull myself up and go and do whatever I have to do, no matter how busy these places are. So for me, that's probably one of the biggest wins, because I want to be in public and be a public kind of person. And so before I basically hid from everything in my life. I had stayed at home. I would go home, even on medication. I was like so drowned out that I would just stay at home and pretty much either sleep, because you're always groggy and tired on that medication. So I'm just going to say, like, when I was on medication and kind of barricading myself at home, so to speak, you just like, there was no end to it, because even as things got worse, they just wanted to give me more medication. But eventually what I learned from their, after their testing, so to speak, is they told me after all that time that I was basically in a 1% category where the medication didn't work. And I didn't learn that until after having trained with you and being able to get off of the medication and be able to go in there and actually tell them, okay, this isn't right. Like, I don't normally see demonic faces when I walk around in my daytime. This medication is not working, and they're like, just give it a few more months, let it work into your system. It'll be fine. I'm like, no. And so being able to
they told you as well. I think they told you that you have to take them like pretty much forever.
Yeah, that was their biggest pitch, was for some people it's basically a lifetime thing. And I'm thinking, like, why would anybody want to be on that? And like, what's the bigger issue? I mean, people live every day without having to be on medication. So if they're trying to medicate somebody, from what I learned in my journey was I have a lot of high like mental energy. I'm very mentally oriented, so very intellectual. So if I'm not engaging that in a conscious manner, I will self-destruct. If I'm not constantly applying myself and using it for something that I'm actually passionate about, I would self-destruct. And I didn't learn that until after training with you, and I started getting the clarity to get off of the medication and get my brain back to being able to function. Because I mean, their solution is basically take a high functioning brain that's very intelligent and dumb it, like just dumb it right down to the point where it's kind of just groggily walking around throughout the day and functioning as according to what they would determine as normal. But it was quite an experience.
All right, thank you for sharing. I really do appreciate that, because I know it's never easy to talk about such things. So I'm really grateful that you decided to share it with the guys today. And what would you say if someone was talking to you? Who would you recommend this training to?
Definitely for members of our tribe. So the entrepreneurs out there, the people that are just like that have that strong desire to create, that are lost. Like guaranteed, if they're watching this interview or they're in that space where they're trying to figure out what to do, anybody who's completely lost inside but has a really deep passion to create something meaningful and change the world. I think a lot of us have that, but there's that trapped. There's like a layer of being trapped that happens along the way. And so anybody that's in that state, that's depressed and anxious and really kind of lost completely, even mentally, your training is going to open their life up in a big way, for sure.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time today. So, guys, if you are on the fence and you would like to find out if this could be the start of your hero's journey, just let's chat. Check out the link below, drop me a message, and let's see where your hero's journey may take you.
I also started drinking coffee randomly. Was never.
Oh, well done,
Yes.
joining the Air Tribe.
I was never into it, and like I think I've had like 4 cups now, and I'm like, I think I'm sold. I think I'm into it now. So.
Well, yeah, as I said, welcome to the Air Tribe.
Fair enough.